My name is Juliana. I'm 37 years old, and I currently live in Colorado. I'm an only child in an intellectual family where both of my parents were doctors. My father, Dr. Raymond Kingsley, was not only a highly skilled surgeon but also a brilliant real estate investor, owning several luxury apartments in the Denver and Aspen areas. From a young age, I was surrounded by love, but also raised with a strong sense of self-respect and independence. Although my father always hoped I would follow his path into medicine, I chose pharmacy instead, partly out of a passion for research and partly because I didn't want to spend my life in his shadow. After graduating from the University of Michigan College of Pharmacy, I started working at a pharmaceutical company based in Chicago. It was a high-pressure but stable job, and I stayed there for over 10 years. I met my husband, Zachary, while attending a public health conference for work. Zach was employed by a fast food chain. Compared to me, his income was significantly lower. But I didn't care. At the time, I believed that as long as two people loved each other, they could overcome any obstacle. I was wrong. From the very first time I met his mother, Lorraine, I felt something was off. She looked me up and down with a cold stare and said in a half-joking, half-mocking tone, "Oh, so this is your girlfriend, Zach. She looks intellectual. A bit old, though. Why not date someone younger and livelier?" Zach just gave a nervous laugh. I tried to stay calm, thinking she was just testing me. But when Zach mentioned where I worked, her attitude changed instantly. Her scowl turned into a beaming smile in just seconds. "You work at Lexington Pharma? That's a big company. Your parents are doctors? Oh, now I understand why my son got smitten." That comment made me feel like a product with a price tag. Nothing more, nothing less. I still married Zach. After the sudden death of my mother in a car accident, I fell into a deep emotional void. At that time, Zach was the only one there for me, comforting me, supporting me, saying kind things. I truly believed he wanted to protect me for the rest of my life. After the wedding, my father gifted me a luxury apartment in the Lincoln Park area of Chicago. He said, "Consider this a wedding gift for both of you. I want you to have a place to call home where you are in control." I teared up as I accepted the keys from him. What I didn't realize then was that this apartment would be the very thing that exposed who Zach and his mother really were. Once we moved in together, I realized Zach didn't do anything except lying on the couch watching TV after work. Housework? He completely ignored it. Laundry, cleaning, cooking, it all fell on me. I once gently asked him to help out. "Zach, I work all day too. The least you could do is give me a hand." But he just shrugged. "You're better at this stuff than I am. If I did it, I'd mess it up anyway." Day by day, I felt less like a wife and more like a maid, but I kept trying to be patient. Because of love. Because I believed I could change him. Lorraine, on the other hand, became more outrageous. She would drop by unannounced, criticize the furniture, complain about my cooking, and, worst of all, ask for money. Pharmacists make good money, right? I know people in healthcare are loaded. I'm just a little short today. Who else should I ask if not my wonderful daughter-in-law? Zach always backed her up. One time, when I tried to say no, he snapped. "Why are you being so stingy? That's my mom." For the first time in my life, I felt like I was trapped in a relationship where I no longer recognized myself. I began losing sleep, feeling emotionally numb, barely hanging on just to keep things from falling apart. What I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning of a true nightmare. After 3 years of living together, I began to see clearly all the things I had chosen to overlook. Zachary, the man who once held me when I broke down over my mother's death, had become a lazy, indifferent, and calculating shell of the man I married. Every morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. to make breakfast, tidy up, and rush off to work. Zach? He stayed on the couch, remote in hand, muttering, "You're working for both of us, right? I'll just watch the house." Watch the house? Please! The apartment was always a mess. Trash piled up in the sink, dirty shirts tossed over chairs, sticky floors. Once, when I asked why he didn't do laundry, he chuckled. "You're better at it. If I do it, I'll just ruin all my dress shirts." I was speechless. But what left me more speechless than anything else was how his mother, Lorraine, had grown accustomed to dropping by any day of the week without notice. She would often arrive carrying bags from the mall and had no problem saying things outright. "Juliana, working at a big pharmaceutical company like that? I bet your credit limit is pretty high, huh? I kind of swiped this purse and now I'm short $300. Can you cover it for me?" When I hesitated, she immediately called out to Zach. "Zach, are you really going to let your wife act this stubborn? She's treating me like I'm nothing." Zach always took her side. He turned to me and said, "Come on, babe, it's just $300. Mom doesn't have anyone else to lean on. If we can help, we should." So I pulled out my wallet. Again. It started with a few hundred, then climbed to thousands. One time she asked me to pay off a loan she took out to buy jewelry. Almost $4,000, saying it was an investment and she'd repay me when she sold it for a profit. I gritted my teeth and transferred the money. To this day, no profit ever appeared, just her continuing to show up at our house, eating, shopping, and asking for more. My savings account, which once had close to $60,000, now had less than a third of that. Even though I kept working steadily, our expenses skyrocketed. I once reminded Zach that we needed to tighten our finances, that I couldn't keep supporting two grown adults and his mother's shopping habits. But he reacted like I was being unreasonable. "You're my wife, not my lender. Why do you keep nitpicking about helping family?" I had nothing left to say. I felt like an outsider in my own home. I worked to support them, cleaned to serve them, and stayed silent just to keep a crumbling marriage from falling apart. One weekend evening, after a long day giving a presentation to the executive board at work, I came home exhausted and found Lorraine cutting open a silk pillow on the sofa to check whether the stuffing was authentic. Horrified, I asked what she was doing. She casually replied, "Pillow cost over $400. Checking the inside is totally reasonable, right? I'm just worried these high-end furniture brands sell knockoffs." I looked at the long cut across the fabric, my blood boiling. I turned to Zach, hoping he'd step in. But he shrugged and said, "Mom's just being cautious, that's all, no big deal." I walked straight to the bedroom and slammed the door. For the first time in years, I sat on the floor, in the dark, and let my tears fall freely. Not because I was hurt, but because I was scared. Scared that if I didn't stop this, didn't say something, my life would be swallowed whole by the dependence and destruction of those two people. But what truly snapped me out of it wasn't the cut silk pillow. It was when Lorraine suggested I sell the apartment to invest with her in a new gemstone business that had just launched in Arizona. When I refused, she said a sentence I will never forget. "You're so selfish, Juliana. That apartment was a gift from your dad, not something you earned. If your mother were still alive, she'd see how ungrateful you've become." I stood frozen. My mother had passed away more than 10 years ago. Even now, just thinking of her brought a sharp ache to my chest, and yet this woman, my mother-in-law, had the nerve to weaponize that grief to manipulate me. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was crying, but because I was planning how to get out. 3 months after that sleepless night, my life took a turn no one could have predicted. I was getting ready to leave the office for the day when I got a call from my father's private physician. His voice was low and serious. "Juliana, I think you should come back to Colorado as soon as possible. Your father needs to speak with you in person." My heart raced. I immediately requested time off and booked the earliest flight to Denver. On the plane, my mind spun with all sorts of theories. My father had still seemed healthy. He went for morning walks, tended to his orchids on the porch. How could anything be wrong? But when I stepped into the living room of the wooden house I grew up in, everything crumbled. My father, Dr. Raymond Kingsley, was lying on the couch, his body thin, his skin pale as ash. He smiled when he saw me, a familiar smile, but weaker than I'd ever seen. I rushed to him, grasping his hand. His fingers were bony and cold. Juliana, don't panic. I just don't have much time left. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It's inoperable. I couldn't get a word out. My throat felt like it was being squeezed shut. I couldn't even begin to imagine what my world would look like without him. "You're the only light I have left," he whispered. "And I don't want that light buried under the darkness of marriage and blind sacrifice." I burst into tears like a child. In the days that followed, I arranged to work remotely so I could stay with him. I moved back into my childhood home, caring for him through every meal and every restless night. Though his body was fading, he still carried the calm and warmth in his eyes that had always comforted me growing up. And Zach, when I told him the news, his first response was, "Really? But your dad's pretty old. Not that surprising, is it?" That line felt like a slap to my face. I choked up, unable to respond. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask if my father needed anything. He didn't offer to come by. All I got was a short text. "Hang in there." 4 days later, Zach flew to Denver, not to visit my father, but to remind me to cover the down payment on a new car his mother had just put on hold. "Mom needs that Lexus for her women's club meetings, you know. That apartment of ours is worth a lot. You could borrow from your dad for now, right?" I let out a bitter laugh. The way he said it, "borrow from your dad," as if my father were just some emotionless ATM. My father heard the entire conversation from his bed. When Zach left, he called me over, his gaze calm, but full of quiet sorrow. "Juliana," he said softly, "you're sacrificing your youth, your health, and your dignity just to hold on to someone who doesn't deserve you." I said nothing. My tears fell onto his hand. "You don't have to keep suffering like this. I know you're strong, intelligent, and worthy of a happy life. Don't let loneliness dim the light in your heart. I won't be able to walk this road with you much longer, but I want you to promise me one thing. Don't live your life in resignation." I nodded, barely able to speak. I promise." 3 weeks later, my father passed away, peacefully in his sleep, just as he had lived, calm, private, and dignified. I was by his side until the very end, holding his hand, like he once held mine when I was learning how to walk. The funeral was simple yet respectful. Hundreds came to pay their respects, from former patients to business partners, and many shed tears. Everyone spoke of his kindness, how he never turned away a struggling patient, how devoted he was as a father, how he lived not for status, but for compassion. Zach showed up but stood quietly in the back, saying nothing. His mother didn't come. "Busy with a gemstone exhibit," Zach explained. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't angry. I just felt empty. In the midst of mourning and exhaustion, I still did everything I could to fulfill my final duty as a daughter. And then, after the ceremony ended, I was called into the office of my father's attorney. "Mr. Raymond left everything to you. There's no one else listed," the elderly lawyer told me. I wasn't shocked, but when he read the exact number aloud, I still froze. Nearly $3 million. It included investments, real estate, stocks, and several overseas savings accounts. The wooden house I grew up in now belonged to me. So did several plots of land in Colorado Springs, a condo in Aspen, and even a penthouse in Seattle that was currently rented out. I sat there, torn between grief and responsibility. And in that very moment, I realized my freedom had arrived. But it would come at the cost of a confrontation I had never imagined. After the meeting with the lawyer, I returned to my apartment in Chicago, carrying a copy of my inheritance documents, my mind still reeling. I couldn't stop thinking about the final look in my father's warm eyes. Amid the sorrow and pain, I knew I could no longer keep living the way I had been. That evening, I didn't say anything to Zach. I simply left the documents on the desk and went into the bathroom, shut the door, and tried to find a few moments of quiet. When I came back out, the folder was gone. My chest tightened. I walked quickly into the living room and found Zach sitting on the sofa, holding the inheritance papers in his hands, his eyes lit up like headlights in the dark. $3 million? He nearly shouted. You told me your dad only left you the apartment. I walked over coldly and snatched the documents from his hand. You have no right to look at these without my permission. But before I could put them away, the front door swung open. His mother, Lorraine, showed up right on cue, as if she'd been tipped off. She stared at me, then turned to Zach. See? I told you. Her dad definitely left a fortune. We weren't stupid for investing in this one, right, son? I turned away, clenching my fists to keep calm. Zach stepped forward without a hint of shame. Juliana, I think we should agree on this up front. The money should be split 3 ways. 1 part for Mom, 1 part for me, and the rest for you. That's fair, right? I couldn't believe my ears. I'm the legal heir. That's the inheritance my father left to me alone. Lorraine burst out laughing. Oh, honey, why did you marry such a clueless woman? She really thinks money that comes in during marriage isn't shared. I know the law. Any asset that appears during marriage is considered marital property, including inheritance. Zach nodded in agreement. There's no need to get all defensive. We're married. It'd be weird if you kept all of it. At that moment, I couldn't take it anymore. I simply said, I haven't finished the legal process yet, but once the money is transferred, it'll go into a separate account, and don't expect to touch a single penny. I think I had crushed their greed, but I had clearly underestimated just how deep it ran. Just 1 week later, Zach submitted his resignation. He told me, I need time to rest. After all those years working for others, now that we have money, I want to finally live for myself. I was speechless. The very next day, his mother moved into my home. She rolled her suitcase right into the living room, tossed a thin blanket onto the sofa, and declared, It's more convenient here. No need for me to go back and forth. And with $3 million, we could totally hire a housekeeper. Juliana. That's when the real nightmare began. Zach did nothing but play video games and shop online. He spent thousands of dollars a week on clothes, electronics, watches, and luxury sneakers. Lorraine, meanwhile, shopped like she was starring in a reality show. Prada handbags, Italian wine, diamond necklaces, not to mention daily spa appointments, skincare treatments, and a list of premium services. One time, she even hired a professional makeup artist to come to the house every morning. I saw credit card charges flying through. The balance in my old savings account dropped by nearly $20,000 in less than a month. When I asked Zach about it, he just said casually, The inheritance is coming soon. Why are you so uptight? I was stunned. I had told them over and over that the money hadn't been released yet, but they acted like it was already in their hands, spending first, waiting for it to appear later. The apartment I once loved had turned into a warehouse of luxury goods. Every morning, I stepped over piles of shoeboxes and handbags just to get to the door for work, while they slept soundly, not even acknowledging my existence. One time, when I came home exhausted from the office, I found Zach flipping through a travel magazine and his mother booking plane tickets. Where are we going? I asked. Lorraine beamed. Hawaii. What do you think? Sunshine, blue water, and plenty of places to spend money. Zach chimed in. Think of it as an early celebration. Once the money comes in, we're planning to buy a villa in Maui. I stood there, hands trembling. I didn't know whether anger, hurt, or disappointment was winning inside me. All I knew was, if I stayed silent any longer, I'd lose everything. That night, I went online and read every single line of inheritance and marital property law in the state of Illinois. And then I found something that made me finally breathe again. Inherited assets in one person's name, if not combined with marital assets, are considered separate property and are not subject to division in divorce. I smiled. For the first time in months, it wasn't a polite smile, because the game had changed. From that night on, I quietly began executing my plan. No yelling, no fighting, just silence and preparation. I opened an entirely new personal account at a different bank, unlinked from anything Zach could access. Then, from the joint account we had used to cover living expenses, I withdrew exactly $50,000. The remainder after their months of reckless spending. I clearly labeled the transfer as division of marital assets for financial protection. Every word I chose had been reviewed by a lawyer because I had secretly hired my own. When my lawyer confirmed you're doing everything by the book, the inheritance is in your name only and isn't subject to division, the $50,000 qualifies as a legitimate marital asset distribution, I knew I had one foot out of the pit that was this so-called marriage. A few days later, Zach and Lorraine excitedly dragged their suitcases out the door on their way to Hawaii. I wasn't invited. They even left a note on the kitchen counter that read simply, "Rest up at home, we're going scouting for real estate investment opportunities for the whole family." The whole family? I almost laughed. But I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. I just called the locksmith. 3 hours after they left, every lock in the apartment had been changed. I reset the security codes, updated the entry pass for the front gate, and moved all important documents, including copies of the inheritance paperwork, into a secure safe at my lawyer's office. That night, I slept soundly. For the first time in months, I didn't hear Lorraine's slippers dragging across the wood floor or Zach complaining that dinner wasn't seasoned the way he liked. The apartment was quiet, just the way I wanted it. A week later, I got a text from Zach. "We'll be back Saturday. Have dinner ready. We need to talk." I didn't reply. That Saturday morning, I sat at a cafe near home. On the table was a cream-colored envelope containing a signed divorce petition, a copy of the $50,000 transfer, and an excerpt from Illinois state law regarding inheritance. At exactly 11:15 a.m., Zach and his mother arrived, wearing Hawaiian print shirts and sunglasses dangling from their necks like two reality show tourists. They sat across from me. Zach frowned. "Why aren't you home?" Mom waited outside for half an hour. "Did something happen to the locks?" I gently placed the envelope on the table. "I changed the locks, and this is the divorce paperwork." Zach raised an eyebrow. Lorraine scoffed. "Is this some kind of joke? You think you're the one calling the shots in this house?" I kept my voice steady, but each word cut like a blade. "This is not a joke. Everything was done legally. The $50,000 from our joint account has been transferred to a separate personal account, verified by my lawyer as a proper division of marital assets. The nearly $3 million my father left me, that's my separate inheritance. It does not count as joint marital property." Zach's jaw dropped. Lorraine's face went pale. "No, no way. I read the law. It says everything is split in half." I pulled out a printed page from the official Illinois government website and pointed to the bolded line. "Inherited assets held separately are not considered marital property if the heir does not merge them into joint accounts or assets." Zach stammered. But I lost my job, and Mom has nowhere to go. You can't do this. We're a family." I looked at him one last time. There was no love in my eyes, only release. "You forgot what family means a long time ago." I tried to hold on, but there's no reason left. My life is not a playground for the two of you to destroy. Lorraine shrieked. "Juliana, you'll regret this. You think you can live happily after tearing this family apart?" I stood, picked up the envelope, and placed it into Zach's hand. "I didn't tear anything apart. I'm just rebuilding my life, and you're not part of it." I walked out of the cafe. Behind me were Zach calling my name and his mother yelling insults. But I never looked back. A few days later, the divorce paperwork was finalized smoothly. The $50,000 I had transferred was confirmed by the court as a valid division of marital assets. Not a single cent from my father's inheritance was touched. And Zach? He couldn't find a job, got his credit cards canceled, and was forced to move out of the apartment within 2 weeks. Lorraine moved in temporarily with a cousin in Ohio. They left behind bitter, spiteful words. But I didn't care. I had lived too long under guilt and submission. Down lived alone, truly alone. But this wasn't the ending. It was only the beginning of a life I owned. 3 months after the divorce hearing, I received a parcel from a law firm based in Ohio. Inside were a pile of printed bills, debt collection letters, and, unsurprisingly, a handwritten letter from Zach. The paper was thin, the handwriting messy. The message? All too familiar. Juliana, I know I messed up. I let my mom control me, and I didn't appreciate you. Now my mom's sick and we have nowhere to go. Could you give me another chance? Not for money, but for us? I folded the letter, completely unmoved. I had loved him, that was true, but forgiveness doesn't mean going back. From what I heard through old friends, Zach and Lorraine were now living in a run-down apartment on the outskirts of Dayton, struggling to pay rent each month. Her Lexus had been repossessed for missed payments, and Zach was drowning in credit card debt from those investment purchases that never existed. As for me, I decided to sell the old apartment in Chicago, a place that had held too many tears and too much endurance. After cleaning it out, I stood in the empty living room, gazing out the high-rise window, where once there had been sunlit mornings and lonely dinners. "Goodbye," I whispered, and walked away without looking back. I returned to Denver, to the old wooden house my father had left behind. It still stood firm, warm and filled with memories, like my father's embrace from years past. Every morning, I opened the windows and let the pine-scented breeze sweep through the kitchen, carried with the birdsong that danced along the wooden fence. I kept my father's desk just as it was, including the worn leather chair where he used to sit and read, as if he were still there, quietly reflecting. In that space, near him, I felt peaceful and whole, not because of money, but because I had chosen my life for myself. I continued working in pharmaceuticals, but switched to part-time and remote. With my father's inheritance, the financial pressure lifted, and for the first time, I could pursue the dreams I had once shelved. I enrolled in a weekend painting class, something my mother had loved. I joined a local volunteer group, providing medical support to the homeless in the neighborhood, and one day I decided to dedicate $150,000 to establish a scholarship fund in my mother's name, Elaine Kingsley, for underprivileged female students studying medicine. I didn't create the fund to reclaim anything from the past, but because I knew someone, somewhere needed a helping hand, just as my father had once extended his to me, unconditionally. One early spring evening, I sat in the backyard, brewed a pot of herbal tea, and opened the final letter my father had written. He had left it in the safe, along with his estate documents, weeks before he passed. "My dearest Juliana, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. But don't be sad. I believe in your strength. Don't let anyone, whether love or blood, cause you to lose yourself. You owe nothing to anyone except your own happiness. Live fully, live with purpose, my girl." Wiped away tears, not from sorrow, but from gratitude. Grateful for the man who had loved me the right way. Grateful that I hadn't let my life slip away in silence. Grateful that I had returned to being Juliana, my truest self. And in the cool breeze of that Colorado evening, I knew my life had turned a new page. No more Zach, no more Lorraine, no more burdens. Just one woman, free, independent, and at peace, just the way my father had dreamed for me. Juliana's story is a powerful reminder that kindness does not mean surrender. In real life, many people, especially women, sacrifice their happiness to hold on to toxic relationships. But as Juliana proved, everyone deserves a life of dignity, freedom, and self-determination. When we learn to say enough, we not only protect ourselves, we open the door to a more peaceful, deserving future, even if it comes at the price of courage. What do you think of Juliana's choices? Would you be brave enough to do what she did when facing heartbreak? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel to hear more powerful, emotional stories about family and life.